I'd go first into what drives, this is a preliminary to my paper. I know I didn't cover this in the paper actually, which is more centrally focused on political security. But let me just give a sort of background for the rapprochement that has changed the name of the game in the Taiwan Strait sort of rivalry. Of course, since the beginning, Taiwan has been confronted with the People's Republic of China since the Civil War. Really, that's the basis of the opposition between the two sides, and took refuge in Taiwan without, however, surrendering or making a formal peace settlement. And China has, ever since that time, had a sense of incompletion, and they would like to complete the Civil War and reunite with Taiwan and reclaim what they consider their territory, and thereby end 100 years of humiliation. They consider this a part of the humiliation that was visited upon them, of course, during the Sino-Japanese War that ended in 1895. So what happened to change this long antagonism and bring about the second and so far the longest period of détente across the Taiwan Strait are three factors. One is domestic political competition, second is economic globalization, and the third, then I'll get into the heart of the paper, which is the strategic triangle and the power balancing among the three principal players making up the strategic triangle. I'll probably talk for about 30-40 minutes. I hope to limit it that, because I understand that you have some excellent discussants, and I'm looking forward to their comments on the paper. This is the domestic competition. In the PRC, Jiang Zemin's attempt at coercive diplomacy towards the end of the century, the last century, led to a change of tactics in Beijing. Beijing was confronted in 2000 with the election of their worst nightmare, which was the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, whose background, of course, as you know, has been in favor of Taiwan independence. And so they essentially broke all contact with the DPP during the 2000 to 2008 period because the DPP refused to recognize the so-called 1992 consensus, which said that there is one China, although they had a significant qualification for that. But anyway, China accepted that. They hadn't accepted it before, but after the election, after 2000 and 2008, when there was no contact at all, and there was a very, very tense period between them, they accepted the 1992 consensus, and they accepted this as a basis for reconciliation with the other side. And so they passed the anti-secession law in 2005, which was what they called a harder hard and a softer soft. In other words, they passed a law actually making it constitutionally against the law for Taiwan to secede. On the one hand, that was the harder hard. But the softer soft was that they agreed in principle to talk with the opposition. They started inviting opposition politicians, as KMT politicians, to the mainland for the first time, rolled out the red carpet for them, and so both Lian Zhan and James Soong visited the mainland in 2005 to a red carpet welcome. Taiwan's political background was that Chen Shui-bian declined the 1992 consensus. Beijing refused to meet with him. Lian Soong visits open new options. Ma changes the domestic political game, and his idea was to change the game from a politics of identity, are we Taiwanese or are we Chinese, to one of economics, because Taiwan was very severely afflicted by the global financial crisis at that time, and there was serious long-term economic problems, and so the electorate was welcome to discuss a non-identity issue, which was, of course, that of economic improvement. And the scandal of epic proportions of the surrounding the financial dealings of Chen Shui-bian just added to the issues for the KMT side in the election, and they won by a landslide in both the legislative elections and the subsequent presidential elections. Now, I should add that part of this was the change in the nature of the electoral system. It changed from a basically PR system to a basically single-member district system, which gave the advantage to the KMT. Won by a landslide, and so, but ironically what happened is that it wasn't really a referendum on identity because they didn't talk that much about identity. Ma Ying-jeou said he was a new Taiwanese. He was born in Hong Kong. He's technically a mainlander, clearly, and he speaks Taiwanese with an accent, with a mainland accent. He said he was new Taiwanese and didn't talk about the identity issue, and neither did the other side. So it was not really a referendum, and since his election in 2008, he hasn't really raised the issue of identity either. He's continued to have that strategy of trying to keep that issue out of play. This is but what I wanted to point out with these graphs is that the identity has continued, and ironically, since the election of Ma Ying-jeou, to be pro-Taiwanese identity. So in terms of identification, the political identification of the Taiwanese is increasingly Taiwanese, and they have shown little. There are two ways that they measure identity in Taiwan. One is national identity, the other is ethnic identity. National identity has to do with future nation preference. Do you want to unite with the mainland? Do you want to be independent, or do you want the status quo? Three options. On the ethnic identity issue, the two choices are you Chinese or are you Taiwanese? So on the ethnic identity issue, continued preference for I am Taiwanese, not I am Chinese, and it hasn't changed a bit. It's continued to widen in that direction. But on future nation preference, also, the overwhelming preference is for the status quo, neither independence nor unification. So that's where that goes. This is China's new nationalism. On the other side, this is adding to the pressure. China has basically since 1989 tried to accentuate or try to emphasize the national heritage rather than the ideology as a basis for legitimacy. And Taiwanese nationalism has also increased and created this Taiwanese identification. So this is another barrier. Washington, what was the political game in Washington? Washington is the most hostile to China of the major powers in terms of public opinion. It's consistently been this way. Europe is more friendly. Asia is more friendly to China. Washington electorate has been consistently hostile, and so during presidential elections, when an incumbent is challenged, the challenger will typically challenge him on policy toward China and call him not sufficiently anti-communist. And this happened very clearly in the 1992 elections. That was directly after Tiananmen, when George H.W. Bush was defeated by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton calling him a coddler of the butchers in Beijing, and then using most favored nation status against China to try to pressure them to adopt human rights improvements. And it happened again in 2000 when George W. Bush challenged the incumbent administration with being too soft on China. But in 2008, it was not an issue. I think that's for two reasons. One is that China is much stronger in 2008 than it was in 2000 or in 1992. And second, they hold over $1 trillion of American debt. I think that was perhaps the American, they can't use that probably, but nevertheless, the fact that they hold so much American debt was probably something to keep people quiet about China. So it was not an issue. China's a bigger thing. And besides, China was not making threats against Taiwan anymore. They adopted a new strategy towards Taiwan of keeping their mouth shut on the Taiwan internal politics and not taking one side or the other publicly. So they didn't really, they shifted to relying on Washington to pressure Chen Shui-bian and allowed the Taiwan politics to proceed without threats, like in the 1996 missile crisis. So that's Washington. Taiwan, the second issue is globalization. In terms of globalization, Taiwan has a very high trade dependency ratio, international economic dependency. And cross-strait trade has gone up increasingly. It's no question that the mainland is now Taiwan's biggest trade partner, and it's been moving ahead, even under DPP leadership to 2000 to 2008. The industry, especially the high-tech industry after 2000, has moved to the mainland. Most Taiwanese laptops, I think, are constructed on the mainland, and they have the mainland. The Taiwanese political elite have tried to prevent that by passing various measures, but that has caused people to simply take evasive action because by moving to the mainland, they can escape the high tariffs of American high import tariffs by exporting from China under a lower currency, and they need that to make that extra margin of profit that they need to survive. So they're going to move to the mainland if they possibly can. So this created a certain sympathy for Ma Ying-jeou's policy of reconciliation with the mainland. This shows I didn't get the Taiwan's susceptibility to crisis, much more than the mainland has had. This shows that Taiwan's economy has been suffering long term, not simply in terms of crises, but long term. In comparison with its small dragon neighbors, including South Korea, Taiwan has not fared as well. As you can see here with comparing 1985 up to 2005. It has not kept up with South Korea, with Thailand, Singapore. The rate of growth has slowed down. And so there is a sense of relative decline. And this has been exacerbated by the fact that Asia has become a noodle bowl of FTAs, of free trade or preferential trade agreements among countries. And Taiwan has been shut out of this noodle bowl because if China doesn't like you to have a free trade agreement with Taiwan, they won't do it. And so all the countries with which the mainland had free trade agreements would refuse to have any negotiations with Taiwan. And so they were shut out of certain trade relationships. So this created added an inducement for them to make a deal with the mainland. If they could get in, if the mainland would make a deal with them, the figuring was that the mainland could not step in and intercede and prevent them from making deals with its trade partners and threatening its trade partners, because they would say, well, you did it yourself. So that added to the economic pressure to make some sort of deal with the mainland. Actually, Taiwan, just a very brief history, had a certain period of détente with the mainland early in the 1990s under the Lee Teng-hui, the early Lee Teng-hui administration from 1990 to 1995, that was frozen, of course, after the missile crisis, after the Lee Teng-hui visit to Cornell University for his alumnal talk and so forth. And this is the second thaw, historically speaking. This is the per capita GDP of this is the trade with the mainland, in which Taiwan has become, in a sense, captive of its trade because it invests very heavily in the mainland. It trades; it's its biggest trade partner. It gets preferential deals from the mainland. They've given them preferential trade arrangements because they're considered compatriots, and so it's become very dependent on this trade. And if you're an investor, you're probably more dependent than the receiver of the investment in any sort of trade relationship. Furthermore, Taiwan is got a favorable balance of trade with the mainland. So they would lose more than the mainland if they broke it off. If they broke off the trade, I don't deny that the mainland derives benefit from the trade as well. It's both sides get benefit from trade. Mainland gets to upgrade its technology and get a lot of high-tech stuff. But Taiwan gets a favorable trade balance. They get a big surplus from the mainland, and they invest there and they make money there. So that creates a certain inducement. This is the exports. This is how it's grown from 1985 to 2002. And if you continue that up into the future, you'll see that continuing pattern of very, very sharp growth of exports and imports from the PRC as a trade partner. This is a politics of the implications of this asymmetric dependency between Taiwan and the mainland. On the one hand, the positive element is that they have a trade surplus, externalize their trade surplus with the U.S. to the PRC, cheap labor pool, and so forth, same language and culture. The negative is the hostage effect, the fifth column effect, and the hollowing out effect. This is what the politicians are afraid of. But the industrialists are not, the CEOs are not so concerned about these factors. So now we come to the security dimension. Of course, the mainland has been consistently Taiwan's #1 security threat. During the Cold War period, the relationship was essentially frozen. There was a bombardment of the offshore islands in 1958, and 54, 55, and then in 1958 there were crises across the Taiwan Straits, basically concerned with those offshore islands of Jinmen and Matsu. But since that time, the mainland's position has been that there need to be violent revolution in Taiwan to liberate Taiwan from this capitalist dictatorship there, and there's alternate artillery shellings of the offshore islands every other day up until the normalization of relations with the United States in 1979, and after that point they proposed this new one country, two systems sort of offer to Taiwan, for the first time making it plausible and inviting for Taiwan to make peace with the mainland without, I mean, to unify peacefully with the mainland. It made a plausible offer for them to unify peacefully with the mainland. Taiwan reacted negatively until the death of Jiang Jingguo in 1987, and then after that they gradually warmed up, and they warmed up. They've never accepted the one country, two systems, but they have started to trade, as you know, even as they technically avoided giving in by going through Hong Kong rather than trading directly. So this has been the security dimension has remained hostile since the missile crisis of 1995-96. Early period of détente, and then since the missile crisis of 95-96, the relationship has been, again, returned to sort of Cold War coolness politically, even as trade grew, as economic, so hot trade, hot investment, and cold politics up until 2008. So this shows the defense budget. The long and the short of this is that whereas during the Cold War, Taiwan could hope to win in a bilateral confrontation across the Taiwan Strait if the mainland invaded. They had sufficient, they didn't have nearly as many troops, of course. The mainland has the largest army in the world still today, but they had higher quality, they had a superior air force and navy, so they could prevent any successful invasion. Since 2005, probably around 2005, most experts agree that the mainland has outdistanced Taiwan clearly, and that they could win in any sort of bilateral standoff if the United States does not become involved. If the United States does not become involved, it's a question of how long they can hold out before they collapse. And the budget has not kept up with the mainland. Of course, the mainland has been growing much faster than Taiwan. Mainland's military budget has been growing by double-digit growth rates every year. And this is a Sovereignty-class destroyer, one of their newest purchases from the Russian Federation, the mainland destroyer, high-tech destroyer. This is the Sukhoi 27 manufactured now in China. They have a plant in Shenyang to manufacture the Sukhoi 27, one of their fourth-generation jets, which is probably superior to the current F-16s that they have in Taiwan. So the bilateral standoff is that the mainland, although it's not as big as the United States, you can see it's bigger than any other Asian country, and certainly including Taiwan. And so the bilateral standoff is that they have to be political about their security. This is Chinese defense budgets, which have gone up. So the security is a logic of political bandwagoning with the United States against and balancing against China. And so That's been the nature of the game for Taiwan. During the Cold War, Taiwan was a sort of made up a dependent triangle depending on the relationship between the United States and PRC. When the United States and PRC had hostile relationships, the U.S. had cordial relationships with Taiwan because they needed it. When the U.S. and PRC had good relationships, they abandoned Taiwan. So it was a sort of dependent relationship on this larger triangle. So we can look at it in terms of the before and after the Nixon visit, essentially. Before the Nixon visit, Taiwan security was guaranteed because the U.S. had hostile relationships with the PRC. After the Nixon visit and then the reconciliation with the mainland between the United States and China, U.S. abandoned Taiwan, and so they were in a difficult position there. But then since the end of the Cold War, U.S. Has played a sort of pivot position, having good relations with both Taiwan and the PRC. This has been frustrating from the PRC's perspective because they would like to take over Taiwan and they think the U.S. is standing in the way. But they have also positive interests with the U.S. that they want to pursue, so the U.S. has been able to maintain this balance, shifting to one side or the other. When the PRC threatens Taiwan, it shifts to the Taiwan side, and when Taiwan starts to act independently, U.S. shifts to the PRC side, as they did during the George W. Bush administration, much to Taiwan's surprise. So that's been the way it's been going. So during the Chen Shui-bian administration, the worst role was the outcast, which was shunned by the other two players who formed a partnership. And Taiwan actually got in that position under Chen Shui-bian by pursuing Taiwan independence, something that the mainland made clear that was the grounds for invasion, for ending this sort of standoff and bringing Taiwan to heel. They also embarrassed the United States because the United States had no interest in defending Taiwan if it pursued independence. So it became avoided by both, in a sense. Washington tried to persuade Taiwan not to do this, to stop this brinkmanship, but it had difficulty, and so it was really a very difficult position that Taiwan put itself in under the Chen Shui-bian period. Ma and his strategists yearned to return to the early 90s when Taiwan maintained good relations with both the U.S. and the PRC. And this is the sort of Taiwan, this is the way it's looked since '71. So the recent breakthrough is 2005 to 2008. It really began with the visits in 2005 of Lian Zhan, and then in 2008, Ma beats Xie Changting in the 2008 elections by shifting to economics, shifting away from the identity issue, and so forth, as I explained before. And so there is now triangular balancing. Ma wants to capture the friend position. His government is highly conscious of U.S. concern that he over-tilts. So there are limits to his tilts. He's been tilting to the mainland, but high sensitivity to the U.S. needs. So this is the new course. He wants to improve cross-strait relations, proclaims the three no's: no independence, no reunification, no war, and gives Beijing his wish list. They resume talks. They now have the three links: direct flights, recognition of mainland degrees, allowing mainland investment, stock markets, housing, tourism, tax, financial agreements, and leading ultimately the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement. Step 2, diplomatic truce, and Step 3, confidence building measures leading to a bilateral peace treaty. They haven't made it that far, and Ma doesn't want to talk about that yet because he would be vulnerable domestically. He's domestically vulnerable anyway. This is Lian Zhan's famous visit in 2005. You can see him there in the front row, smiling on the right. So this is what Ma hopes for right now in 2008. Since 2008, a new ménage à trois in which all three players have good relations with one another. So this is what Taiwan wants. This is what Beijing wants. Taiwan wants international space, and they've got that. Mainland has allowed them to join the World Health Association. They have stopped having this fight about recognition by other countries. They've allowed Taiwan to have to keep its present allies, provided they don't strive to take them away from the mainland. So they have about 23 countries that recognize Taiwan as China, and that's about as much space as they're going to get. They're now negotiating a free trade agreement with Singapore, and if that comes off, they'll probably try for something with the Philippines. So they want to expand their informal diplomacy as well, and it looks like the mainland will permit that. But what Beijing wants is some sort of active commitment to reunification, and Ma has been very reluctant to give that. He doesn't want to. That would be very dangerous for him in terms of domestic politics. He probably won't do that. So this is the tourism has taken off. They expect 2 million tourists this year. This is the first flight between Taipei and Beijing in 2005. First direct flight between mainland and Taiwan. And now this was a passenger boat, docked right in Kaohsiung Harbor, carrying a boatload of mainland tourists. There's now flights from the mainland to Taiwan from a number of different airports. So that's where it looks right now in 2012. All sorts of cross-strait exchanges. ECFA seems to be facilitating its integration with the other trade partners. And there's some spillover to culture and identity issues. Although Taiwanization continues, ironically, I don't know why that is. But there is increasing commerce, and they hope to exert greater soft power on Taiwan. The negative factors, Ma is very vulnerable electorally. It's a very tight race right now. He comes up for re-election in 2012. He's being challenged by a woman in the opposition party, Tsai Ing-wen, who is quite popular, and it's a neck-and-neck race right now because there is a lot of opposition to any sort of approach to the mainland, which is, after all, a major security threat, and the Americans won't sell them F-16 CDs. So it looks like the Americans are backing away from the security guarantee of Taiwan. We'll have to see. I don't know. Okay, that's it.